Staff are you raising here?
Shelley, what are you doing now?
Now I work for a company in Charlotte doing voice work and learning telephony and telecom and IT and all that fun stuff.
You know what I'm thinking?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah, sorry,
What about you, Ken?
I am about to celebrate my 10th year on staff of a church in Spartanburg. It's a 7,000 member church, and wear many hats there. And then part-time I work at a really great radio station. Which shall remain nameless, 106.9.
By Mountain.
You can't play this whole video now, can you?
Oh, yeah.
Sure we can. We play the video. And do that part-time.
You just can't get radio out of your blood.
No, you can't.
I've heard you too, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So
Joey, do you listen?
I've heard him.
I've heard it before. No big deal.
Joey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm actually a pastor now in Rock Hill, South Carolina,
Sweet.
at Oakdale Baptist Church. And my wife is working with the children there, and we've been there for a while and just having a blast doing it.
Do you miss radio?
I
Miss
say
cleaning the gutters?
I miss cleaning the gutters and getting the poison ivy out of the woods. That's what my friend Ken and my youth pastor would get me to do. I don't know if that was punishment just because I was bad in youth or what. I don't know. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But no,
Did it work?
Well, at some point you got too big for the wedgies.
Yeah,
this is
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
So you had to
think of something
move
else.
up. But yeah, coming here today, I actually do miss it. I was looking, I was like, man, this back room in here when I would voice track for the 3 a.m. slot when nobody listened. I spent a lot of time in there, and it's just really cool to come back and see you guys.
Yeah, there was a time that I would have done it for free. Really. I mean,
Gosh, I wish I'd known that.
Yeah, I know. I would never have told you that at the time. But there
Can you
was
stay
a time.
after a little bit? We can talk.
Time a long time ago.
Yeah.
No, I loved it when I did it. And, it was a new phase in my life, but it was a great place to work. Great people. I miss that time.
Yeah.
I don't miss the work or the doing it now. I wouldn't want to do it, I don't think. But I do miss that time.
You remember the time where Joe would shove us in the kitchen?
In the kitchen?
Because we never had enough room
We
here.
were the kitchen people.
Kitchen people.
Yes.
Where the kitchen is now, that's...
Yes.
What do you mean
I was
Joe
not gonna
shoved
name.
you
We
in
did have
there?
a-
Oh, you shoved us in there.
Yeah.
But we had our own snack room, had a refrigerator.
That's
I mean,
right.
most people want a refrigerator in their office.
Sure.
We had a full-size refrigerator.
And a microwave.
Yeah.
It seemed like, I think back the years ago, it just was a different pace.
Yeah,
Of, like,
it
we
was.
used to actually have a slow season, and there was no email to battle with.
This was
and
before internet. When we started, there was no internet.
We would
At
all,
least we didn't have it anyway.
I mean, we would literally shut the office door and go to lunch as a staff, all 4 or 5 of us.
Yeah, there were only 4 of us, 5 of us
I
at the
think
time.
one of my favorite memories is, and I'll see if I can get through this without crying, is I never tell the story without crying. Okay, so I'll try. One night I was driving, I'd left work, and I was driving down Independence Boulevard, going towards Charlotte from here. And I don't remember who it was, but there was a little boy that we'd been praying for as a station. This is when we used to do prayer time. And so every day we would stop for 15, 20 minutes and just have prayer time on the air. And so this little boy that everybody, all of our listeners, had been praying for, and we would get calls, how is so-and-so doing? And I remember riding down the road, and Ken, you interrupted a program, because at that time, after 7 o'clock, it was programming. It was, I don't know, focus on the family, things like that. And you broke into the middle of one of those programs to make the announcement that that little boy had died. And you spent the next, I don't know, however long, 15, 20, 30 minutes, just praying on the air and taking calls from people. And it was like, for just a moment there, we were all like really a family. I mean, we say, it's a family, the station's a family, but until you have that intimacy, and that night showed me that this was more than just a radio station. It really was a family. And I just don't see that happening anywhere anymore, but at that time, and that touched me, and I never forgot that, just the fact that you were able to make that connection, and that we all, as listeners and as a station, as Christians, you know, the body of Christ, we came together that night. We were a church family. That's what we were. You know.
We had, you know, those stories were always, I'd forgotten that. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I remember being on the air one day and a guy called and he was weeping. And he said, I've got a, you know, back then the station used to go by 92 FM. He said, I've got a 92 FM license plate. We put thousands of those things on the fronts of cars. And he said, I've got one on the front of my car. And he said, and I was just, he said, I've struggled with going to adult-oriented businesses. And he said, and I was just pulling into one. And he said, and it had a reflective window where you couldn't see in. And he said, but as I was pulling up, it reflected 92 FM. And he said, and as I saw that, he said, God just convicted me. And he said, and I couldn't go in. He said, I sat there in the parking lot of this filthy place, and he said, I just asked God to help me be the man that I needed to be. And he said, they used that license plate to convict me. So, and those kind of stories, you know, we would hear over and over and over, and I know you still hear them today.
I remember when we did freestyle with Clayton King, and I remember that, I think it was probably the first month we were doing it, and I was doing the soundboard, and somebody had called in. I remember, never forget, you were in your office, and somebody called in and said a word they should not have said on the radio.
Before delay.
We didn't have delay.
We didn't have delays.
Who needs delay? And I remember just everybody's face in the room that was like, what do we do?
I remember Ken running down the hallway.
He ran. You could hear his feet going. But one thing after that you know listeners didn't get to hear was Clayton, who got his phone number. That we got his phone number off there. The kid that was talking on the radio, and he called him back as soon as the show was done and witnessed to him and talked to him. And it turned out the kid was on drugs, and you know he just took the time to tell him about the gospel. And it was just, you know, there's a ton of stories.
I remember that night. It was the question: if you could ask God any question,
That's right.
what would you ask
was.
Him?
Yep.
And the kid thought he was being kind of a smart aleck and said something on the air, and everybody froze for a moment. But then Clayton probably did one of the greatest moments of ministry I've ever heard, where he said, "You know what? If you're being honest and you really, that's a question you'd ask God. Hey, that doesn't scare him."
Yeah.
You know, and Clayton started ministering, and it was just an incredible.
It was incredible.
moment.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.